years ago, in Samuel Marsden Collegiate School's first ever project-based learning class, 13-year-old Ara wrote a school waiata. Waiata is the Māori word, or Indigenous word, for song. And it was a song that told our school story in the Māori language. And for Ara, as a Māori student, this was a very significant personal project for her to work on. 4 years later, that waiata is embedded in our school culture and is sung at all ceremonial occasions. It's sung with pride and with the actions that traditionally accompany this genre of music. And Ara is now our deputy head girl. So this special gift to our school confirms the value of project-based learning. It gives students the opportunity to develop something unique of personal significance and interest to them. And its potential has excited me ever since. Kia ora. Greetings from New Zealand. I'm Margaret Adeane, Academic Director and Deputy Principal at Samuel Marsden Collegiate School. Marsden is an Anglican private girls' school in Wellington, New Zealand's capital. It is non-selective and an inclusive community with a proud tradition of academic excellence. Most of our girls are engaged in and enjoy their learning. They're noted for their confidence, their strong communication skills and involvement in a wide variety of activities from music to sport to service. I've been impressed by some of the fantastic outcomes for schools whose students usually struggle to engage and thrive when they have introduced project-based learning programs. It's evident that when learning is given a real-life context and initiated by personal interest, it can turn on a light bulb for the disengaged student. My question was, how do you make it work in a school where traditional models of learning have served students so well for over 140 years? How do you open eyes to alternative approaches? I wanted to explore ways in which project-based learning could be a framework in which to develop such skills as creativity, resilience, and innovation, and encourage girls to willingly step outside the narrow confines of traditional learning and assessment and truly embrace their potential. I also wanted to see what role feedback had in growing those skills. Ultimately, the brave, not perfect mentality was what we were aiming for. New Zealand enjoys a strong culture of women leading and achieving. There are some exceptional role models within the orbit of our students. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, Governor-General Dame Patsy Reddy, and our Chief Justice Dame Helen Winkleman. And yet we see the fragility of girls on a daily basis, their desire for approval, a hesitancy to step outside their comfort zone, and a fear of failure, and tears over grades that are less than perfect. So this complex coexistence of confidence and reticence is both intriguing and frustrating. A willingness to experiment, make mistakes, to learn, unlearn and relearn are strengths, and we need to nurture them. We need to help wean girls off a dependence on grades and teacher approval as markers that define their achievement. Empowering students as drivers of their own learning through project-based learning is an approach that's gaining traction through the PBL movement. And I was initially drawn to PBL by the work of educational thought leader Yong Zhao. His vision is for a carefully designed passion project where students can explore, experiment and enhance their passions and strengths. And Zhao's position is supported by the recently published World Economic Forum paper, Schools of the Future, which describes project-based learning as creating learning ecosystems that are personalised and self-paced, accessible and inclusive, problem-based and collaborative, lifelong and student-driven. And these principles were motivators for our approach. In our school, where academic achievement is historically a strength, PBL sits slightly uneasily alongside more conventional programs. Marsden girls like to know exactly what is required of them. They like structure. The personalised project is much scarier. How do you create your own personal challenge? How do you know which direction to take it in? What if it goes wrong? This Global Action research project gave me the opportunity to look more closely at classroom strategies and ways in which feedback can be used to harness curiosity and encourage students to take a braver approach to independent learning. Along with bravery, we wanted to encourage failure as a badge of honour, as a marker of having tried something a little daring and outside the comfort zone that just didn't work out. So Failibration was built into our program to celebrate those who tried and couldn't deliver. With the onset of the global pandemic, the everyday world of school tipped upside down. It became difficult to truly explore meaningful ways of growing the brave, not perfect mentality. Lockdown, a transformed teaching and learning landscape, and a dramatically altered world changed perspectives and attitudes. I had anticipated a fear of failure in the students' approach to PBL, but in the 2020 context, it wasn't fear of failure that limited students' vision of what they could achieve, but pragmatism. When the chips were down, students prioritised conventional learning, retreating to familiar systems that they knew and understood in order to get through the year. They focused on the stuff that counts. Participants in the Action Research Project were 30, 13 and 14-year-old girls in 2 dedicated PBL classes. Remarkable time for Year 9 students, where they had a blank canvas selecting a personal project, and perspectives of Aotearoa in Year 10. Aotearoa is the Māori or Indigenous name for New Zealand, and in this course, students created an artefact and a medium of their own choosing to enhance their own and others' knowledge of Māori culture, beliefs and languages. Year 10 students were therefore working within a specific context, while Year 9 students in Remarkable Time were not. Instructional strategies included an intentional shift away from a focus on outcomes and towards an awareness of process through feedback and reflection. While 80% of students initially identified as being strongly interested in developing their own project, or at least curious, it became more challenging for them as they had to settle on a topic. Coming up with an idea proved an obstacle for over 50% of students. Interestingly, in the Year 10 course, where a context was given, they settled much more readily on a topic than in Year 9, where there were no barriers. This suggests that the blank canvas is much scarier than a given context. 3 tools I found useful for collecting data on progress, attitudes and student awareness of their own learning were ongoing student reflection, a regular exit ticket and one-on-one conversations. Questionnaires at the start and end of the course were also used. Reflection came through a 3-part organisational principle called Discover, Create and Share, which comes from PBL Works, which is an online resource centre for teachers implementing project-based learning programs. PBL Works refers to this as the gold standard principle. Students first need to learn what they don't know and work out what needs might be met by their proposed product. And this ongoing reflection tool provided useful information to inform feedback conversations which occurred later. Students also used a regular Where Am I At exit ticket to pinpoint how they were feeling about their project. The exit ticket used Seninga's learning model as a framework, which organised learning into 3 zones: the comfort zone, the stretch zone and the panic zone. And it proved a great tool for monitoring where students were at any given time. Interestingly, there was a strong correlation between those students who featured regularly in the stretch zone and those who gained real satisfaction from their projects. Conversations deliberately focused on student goals, learning, setbacks and next steps. Costa and Garmston have an excellent conversation model called Goal, Medal and Mission, which I really liked working with. And what I liked about this approach was the focus on process rather than outcomes, and the deliberate avoidance of praise for outcomes. I particularly like their warning that praise shuts down thinking. The medal always relates to an aspect of their process. The other key element of gold medal admission is used by students to identify what is working well for them and what their next steps are. The best kind of feedback enables students to articulate their own successes and challenges and know themselves what they've done well. Here's an example from Catherine in Year 9 in Remarkable Time, and she designed her own video game.
What I did well, I think, was when I found that I couldn't program it by myself, I looked for help to achieve it. By that I mean I went to a holiday program to ask for some help to get some basic understanding of Java, because I didn't know anything about it, and it was a bit of a leap into the deep end, I think.
So I really like the way that you tackled the sub-problems in order to get to the next step. That was really great. So what were you proudest of in terms of what you managed to achieve?
I was most proud of actually making something and it working.
Yeah.
And I actually did understand some of the things I learnt, so
yeah,
that was pretty good.
So if you were going forward now, what do you think you've got that you can take forward?
I think I definitely have an understanding of what it's like to, I guess, learn a language other than HTML and CSS and stuff, like those code-based languages. And I found that online sources aren't that helpful because they just expect that you know like everything. So already, or they're kind of boring, or they're not free.
So you can be really proud of the steps that you took along the way to get to your goal, can't you?
Yeah.
Developing skills in time management were critical, and it was such a pleasure to see students responding to this through their own discovery rather than a timeline imposed by a teacher. There were some fantastic and diverse projects. In Year 9 Remarkable Time, Australasia made an infotainment video program which went out to the school community on a regular basis. It involved time management, planning, communication, and the courage for her to connect with people right across the school, along with the usual video making and editing skills.
Who is a female role model to you and why?
My mum, because she works really hard for my family.
Well, for me, I think a female role model would really be my grandma, because I grew up with her always being there to help me and support my mum as well, because I'm the oldest and she was still trying to work things out.
Someone in my life who's a role model for me is my older sister.
There's something that I've noticed from watching your infotainment that I think you've achieved really well is bringing people together from different year groups and different age groups, and that's a really hard thing to do in a school, isn't it? Because often you've just got your own friends. So I think that's something that I've seen you achieve. How did you go about bringing together the different age groups?
I just reached out to who I knew in those groups and asked if they knew anyone that would be keen, and then I would reach out to them, and if there was anyone like that was hosting something for the week, like Easter or Mars and Feminist, that kind of thing, I would reach out to the person organising, and ask them if they would like to participate.
In Year 10, Perspectives of Aotearoa, Olivia made a dress and embellished it with the constellations that represent Matariki.
Well, I was hoping to get more awareness around Matariki, the Māori New Year, because like a lot of people my age, they respond more to fashion than they do to books. Like just people telling them about something. So I was hoping to just like get people to recognise it more through my dress.
So how will you know when you've achieved what you set out to do?
Well, hopefully when they see the constellation, they'll know exactly what constellation it is.
So what will a good outcome look like?
Just at that time of the year is like more celebrated, because sometimes it goes by with unnoticed. So yeah, it's like more people celebrating it.
However, there definitely were a number of students who opted out of the challenge, choosing unremarkable topics and failing to push themselves into a challenging space or to finish. There was a strong link between students who remained in the comfort zone on their Settingers Where Am I At chart and those who did not challenge themselves in the choice of topic. A significant number of students did not complete their projects and expressed regret at the end of the course, and there's a few possible reasons for this. The focus on process rather than product definitely reduced the pressure to complete. Difficulty with topic choice and the open-ended nature of the program created barriers, as seen by these student responses. I wish I'd come up with a better Remarkable Time project. I did enjoy the one I was doing, but I feel that I needed to learn more about other things and push myself to the limit. With a better topic, I would have been more motivated to finish. And since what you could do for your project was very open, I found it quite hard to come up with something that pushed me out of my comfort zone and that I'd be motivated to do, both in my own time and in class. So, as is often the way, they would have done things differently if given another chance. Wouldn't we all? The hierarchy of subjects which subconsciously exists within their collective thinking, along with the external pressures of the upside-down world of COVID, led students to make some pragmatic choices. When asked to rank Remarkable Time's importance in comparison to their other subjects, its lesser position was made blatantly clear, with 64% of students identifying learning in Remarkable Time as less important than other subjects. Failure to complete was not a win for my intention of creating a brave, not perfect attitude. However, it was a fair reflection of their prioritising of other, more important subjects in a challenging year dominated by a worldwide pandemic. Post-2020 and all its upheaval, we have engaged in a lot of school-wide thinking about how we prioritise learning over assessment and how we visibly acknowledge and reward the essential non-cognitive and emotional skills we seek to grow. If we consider these skills to be critical, we need to change aspects of our system to reflect their importance. Schools and universities traditionally focus on measurable outcomes. In tertiary education, ranking determines students' access to high-stakes courses. School qualifications are quantified and aggregated. It's difficult to capture and measure qualitative information, but in an age that demands more of education, it's not an excuse. To meet the World Economic Forum goals, these outdated systems of measuring success need to change. At our school, change is afoot in small but visible ways. Our school report format now includes feedback on engagement, contribution, organisation and tenacity. In 2021, our end-of-year prize-giving will feature awards for junior students in creativity, problem-solving, entrepreneurship and tenacity, rather than for subject rankings. By demonstrating that we value these skills at an institutional level, we hope that there will be a trickle-down effect to students. We're on a pathway to preparing our girls to thrive in a world that will demand much more of them than success in formal testing situations. We will continue to encourage them to be brave, not perfect.
Hi, Margaret. Firstly, congratulations on finishing your action research project. It's amazing what you've achieved in just 18 months. How do you feel?
It's fantastic to have finished because it was quite a tumultuous year, and there were moments when I thought it wouldn't get finished. So to have actually gone through the whole process and submitted and to be happy with what I've done, it feels really good.
Yes, of course, the pandemic happened and that wasn't on the horizon when you first applied. So that must have, really affected how things went ahead for you.
Absolutely. I mean, we were very lucky in New Zealand in that we didn't have a whole lot of time out of school. We probably only had about 6 weeks out of school in all, but it definitely affected the psyche of students and their attitude to what they were doing, and sort of the whole psychology of students, I think, has been a little bit different post return to school and in the current pandemic climate, which still is ongoing despite the fact that we're relatively normalised. So yeah, it was quite an upheaval, and I did have to change direction because of it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that shortly, but I just stepping back a little bit to when you were thinking about the project in the beginning. Did you have any experience of action research before you started this?
No, I didn't. I haven't done any sort of study in a while, really, for a number of years. Probably. Yeah, the last time I'd done any serious study was in 2014, actually. So to undertake a school-based action research project was new to me, and I wasn't particularly familiar with the difference between what action research involved as opposed to perhaps just research. So yeah, it was new.
So what do you think you've learned then? I mean, if you had to explain action research to someone else, how would you neatly sum it up?
Well, I guess it's in the word action, that you're actually actively involved in gathering data in your own work environment and sort of putting that together with the readings that you're doing around your topic and marrying the two together. I found it very interesting, actually.
Oh, that's great. So the theme for this first pilot cohort of the Global Action Research Collaborative, which everyone calls GARC, the theme was feedback. And was that something that you had been interested in for a while?
Yes, I think, it's gaining traction probably as a theme. I can see why it was chosen as the broad theme, because the way we give feedback to students is really becoming very significant in determining directions that students are taking. And I think we're in a climate of moving away from just marks and end results and thinking a lot more about process. I'm very interested in process, the learning process, as opposed to just the test at the end, and I really liked exploring feedback in that context of the learning journey for students. Yeah.
And was it just to do with students, or more particularly to do with feedback and girls?
Oh, well, absolutely. The project was set up around feedback and girls, and I teach in a girls' school, so definitely the way girls respond to feedback, and I'm sure many teachers have the experience of students not particularly looking at feedback, just going straight for, so what did I get? A little bit of I teach in a high achieving girls' school where marks and grades mean everything, and we really want to shift that attention away from that to students actually having some value for the learning process and understanding what they're learning and how those skills might be transferred into other contexts. So yes, particularly girls, and also girls, I think they're a little bit fragile around marks and outcomes and grades, a little bit obsessive about those particular things. Also, they often feedback. There's a difference between feedback and praise, and I was really interested in my own research and exploring that difference and the way constructive feedback can work with students as opposed to just telling them they're doing well.
So your project was designed around two different groups of girls, older and younger, and they had slightly different project-based tasks that they were doing. And you did find differences between the older and younger girls, didn't you?
There was actually only a year's difference between them, but they were also. So my project was around project-based learning, and the younger group, who was sort of 13-year-olds, they had a completely open task. It was a half-year course where they were freely. They had the freedom of choosing a project. It's like a little bit like a passion project, really, to explore. The older group, which was the year ahead, theirs was actually in a context, a given context, although it was a very broad context. And the course was called Perspectives of Aotearoa, which is looking at Māori New Zealand culture, and they had to explore some aspect of that and create their own project around learning in that domain. But that domain is huge, so it could have been around medicine and science, or it could have been around mythology or storytelling or language, or it was very vast, but it had to be in that particular context. But what we did find, I found that students settled much more quickly on a topic, the older girls, than the younger ones. Having sort of open choice for the younger ones was quite difficult, even though they tell you they want to do something of their own choice. If you give them their own choice, sometimes they struggle a little bit to come up with something to do.
And do you think the pandemic impacted on that at all?
Yes, yes. I just don't think we got the same level of commitment from students to the project, and that's one of the findings from my own project was that in that year, in 2020, in the end, the whole mentality of students really changed to just sort of getting through. Let's just doing what they had to do and prioritising, and they didn't particularly prioritise their project-based learning because they didn't see it as important as some of the more mainstream subjects, English, maths, science, something like that. So it did get sidelined a little bit. I think it does under normal circumstances, but even more so because of the pandemic.
But do you feel that you still managed to learn a lot about feedback through undertaking the project?
I think a lot of what I've learned about feedback is actually I'm now applying and talking about much beyond the project-based learning environment, and much more so about helping students to think constructively about their learning. What a factor in the project-based learning is a little bit of paralysis, just not being able to do things perfectly, so not getting started. And I'm seeing that in other subjects and school-wide, just that inability to get started. So I think that feedback is really crucial to help, even feeding back on the smallest, the earliest stages, to help students just get over the humps and to keep going when the going gets tough. Yeah.
So going through this whole process, and obviously you had the interruption of the pandemic, which no one could have predicted, but do you feel now a lot more confident about action research and perhaps either doing more yourself or mentoring someone else in your own school to do a project?
Yes, and I think it's really valuable. I mean, doing the reading was actually really valuable for me, because I think often, when you're practicing in the classroom, you've got some ideas around what's happening, but it's quite good to go back and find the reading that supports what you're kind of observing. So I felt that marrying up of the research and the practicality of it was really valuable, and I'm very grateful to have done that reading
and learned a bit more about what people are saying, and also because we were part of a group, an international group of people, and we met regularly on Zoom and sharing what we were doing. It was to me, that was the richest part of the whole project, was that discussion with my fellow GARC people around the world, because we were all working on feedback, and it was really interesting to see how universal some of the themes were. And I'd hear someone in another country talk about what they were experiencing with their students or their own project, and I'm thinking that's so similar to what's happening for me in my school. So I really love that aspect of it.
Yeah, I've heard via the grapevine that the whole networking aspect was fantastic, and it must be so nice when you're doing an action research project and there are other people in other countries working on the same theme, and you can all share things that go well, things that don't go so well, trade advice and so on.
And also because I wouldn't expect it to happen to anyone else in the future, but because we were all in the pandemic, and so there was me in New Zealand, there was someone in Australia, 2 in the US, somebody in Spain, someone in Canada, South Africa, UK. It was just fantastic global experience, and everyone's in the same, having the same kind of global part of this global crisis, and the impact on people in the different schools and how people were managing it and continuing to get on with their project, but also what it meant in their schools. It was so interesting.
And what impact do you think it makes that everyone else that you were working with is a teacher at a girls' school as opposed to any other school? Did that really help?
Oh yes, very much so, because just as I was mentioning, just that sense of understanding when they were talking about girls, just sort of common traits in girls in the classroom, the way girls like to work, the way girls like to learn. There's something quite unique about it, and that's quite a universal experience.
So where to from here? I mean, do you have any plans to perhaps do some future research, or do you feel like now that you've learned a lot out of this and there will be maybe some changes made at your school? What sort of impact has doing this action research project had for you?
I'm not sure that I will be undertaking any global action research in the near future, but I would certainly be very positive about anyone else who was thinking about it. But what it is impacting on some of the directions that we are taking at school around the way we're using feedback and the way we're using, particularly one of the topic that was part of around my feedback was about learning to fail and learning to accept that things don't always go well, and that's tied into the whole feedback cycle, and those principles are really being pushed out into the wider school community as we're trying to help students to articulate their own learning and not just wait for a teacher to tell them a grade or a result. So feedback to me isn't just about me telling a student how they are learning, but helping them to talk about how they're learning themselves. And that's something that we are really working on across the board at the moment.
Yeah, so you feel that for the students taking part in this project has helped them as well, and as you say, in terms of being able to articulate what it is that they really need or they want to know about how they're doing?
I think so, although they probably weren't particularly aware that they were contributing to that. I think it's more that the process is something that we can be using more widely, and they would hopefully not just encounter it in their project-based learning now. They might encounter it in other areas of their learning, because we're we are applying some of those principles more broadly.
Well, that's a fantastic result, I think, that you feel that, you've learnt so much through the project that there are broader applications into the school.
Definitely.
Well, so thank you so much for joining us, Margaret. I really appreciate, all the work that you've put in and talking to us today. And as I said, congratulations so much. You have achieved an incredible amount in 18 months, and I hope you feel justly proud of the work that you've done.
Well, I just think it was fantastic to have this opportunity. So I have really enjoyed working with both the Alliance of Girls' Schools of Australasia, but also the National Coalition of Girls' Schools, which is the US organisation, and to be part of those two groups and the fantastic support that we got from both those organisations and the introductions to people beyond that was a very rich opportunity. And sometimes here in New Zealand we feel a very long way from the rest of the world, so it was a great way of connecting with people around the world. I loved it.
Absolutely, and that's what it was all about, the Global Action Research Collaborative. So I'm glad that you found that aspect of it so rewarding, and congratulations again. Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, Jan.